Hello, I'm Mark Kimmel. I'd like to talk to you today about some amazing discoveries I've made and how they affect you very directly. We have the ability today to dramatically affect this planet with our technology and our consumption. What most people don't know is that we also have the ability to transform this planet into a veritable paradise. I call this moment the pivotal juncture in human history. There are a number of factors that are coming together. It's no one factor, but a number of factors, and that's what we're going to discuss today. Before we do that, let me give you a little bit of my background. There was a long period of time when I was involved in the business world where I was very unconscious. If you look in your pocket, into your billfold, into your purse, I know you have a credit card. On the back of that credit card is a magnetic stripe. I was part of a team that conceived the idea of putting a magnetic stripe on the back of the credit card. In 1970, we went and produced the first currency vendor. You now call them ATMs. In 1970, we also produced the very first swipe reader. That's that little device that sits next to a cash register. And if you've traveled recently, you've probably had your airline ticket put through one of those boarding pass machines. We built the first one of those in 1970. I had a very successful business career, but I was unconscious. To give you an idea of how unconscious I was living in Los Angeles at the time. I was dating a young lady who lived in Palm Springs. I went out to visit her one weekend. Her father took me into the study of their home and showed me a book. On the front of that book was the label Top Secret, Project Blue Book, United States Air Force. And now I don't know whether this was one of the truly top secret documents or this was one for public consumption. But in that book was an incredible array of photographs of what we called in those days flying saucers. We talked about that during dinner, and I went back to work the next day at my job in Los Angeles and completely forgot about it. At about that same time, the Apollo project was headed for the moon. One of my co-workers, because I was working in an outfit that went and supplied equipment to a secret government project, one of my co-workers one day came up, tapped me on the shoulder and said, "Did you know they've discovered a base on the back side of the moon?" And I said, "Oh, you're crazy. That's outrageous. That's preposterous." And I went back to work. So I have been pulled kicking and screaming into these amazing discoveries that I'm about to share with you. In 1987, I was on the receiving end of some paranormal experiences. At that point in time, I said, you know, there's got to be more to life than this. There's got to be more to life than waking up every day, going to work. There's got to be more. So I began to investigate. One of the things I stumbled upon was the Urantia book. At that point in time, in 1987, I would characterize myself as being a believer. Then, in 2001, this event happened. This was May 9th, 2001, the National Press Club, downtown Washington, D.C. This was the Disclosure Project, headed by Stephen Greer. 22 top-ranking military government officials stood up and talked about their experiences over the years with extraterrestrials and UFO contact. These courageous people risked coming forth. In the audience that day were all of the major media, all of the world's newspapers, television, and radio. The amazing thing about that event was not only the disclosures that were being made for the first time publicly, but the fact that nothing made it into the newspapers, nothing made it on television. In that same year, I had the opportunity to witness some events firsthand. I was out with a group one evening, out in the field by ourselves. There were 40 of us. I happened to glance into the sky to the left, and there were four perfectly formed squares, as if there was a train passing in the sky and someone had suddenly opened the windows. 4 perfect squares. Now, I couldn't tell whether they were small squares up close or large squares at a great distance, because when you're out there at night, you really don't know. That made a big impression on me. I was out with that same group for the rest of that week. We saw amazing things. So that caused me then to become what I call a knower. And once you know that there are things beyond belief, you can never go back to being merely a believer. Trillion, my first book, was published in 2002. At that time, I thought I was writing science fiction. When the manuscript was ready to go to press, then all of a sudden, I became a knower, and I had to revise some things. Trillion, most people believe, is fiction, but many people have come to me after reading Trillion and saying, "Mark, this story is true." Some people have come to me and said, "This is the story of my life. How did you know?" Decimal will be published in the summer of 2004. In Decimal, we take the story further. We allow the extraterrestrial characters within these books to tell you about their vision of the universe, about their vision of who we are, about their vision of what they see as a potential future for this planet. Some of the conclusions I have reached after several years of investigation are that, and it goes back to this old saying of what you put out is what you get back. My experiences with extraterrestrial contact have all been very benign, very benevolent, but I have learned that other people view extraterrestrial contact and the messages coming from extraterrestrials through their own filter. I've seen people who are fear-based, and you know what? They get back fear. I have seen people approach this whole subject in a very loving manner, and they get nothing but love back. This is an advertisement from one of my favorite restaurants down in Mazatlan. I think it goes and epitomizes what I'm trying to say to you, and that is that the first time you see one of these things for real, yes, it's a little kinky, but after you understand, after you become a knower, then you begin to appreciate what extraterrestrial contact is all about and what it means for us. I've also discovered that my contact with extraterrestrials can be profoundly spiritual. As I say, I've now had the experiences and I have talked to hundreds of people. By and large, most of the people I talk with have that same impression, and that is of a loving, caring contact between ourselves and species from another planet. The final conclusion I've come to is that we are faced with a marvelous puzzle. And that's what we're going to explore in a little while. And the puzzle is that we are a highly conscious people, but we are also living on a planet which is undergoing severe degradation. Let's take this a piece at a time. Let's first look at the interactions with what I call non-human conscious life forms. This is a painting from the 15th century. In the 15th century, there were no hot air balloons, yet the artist included something in his painting. I know it's difficult to see from this painting, but in the background there is a man and his dog, and they are looking up into the sky at an airship. Again, in the Middle Ages, there were no airships. This, of course, has been shown. It was recorded. This is the famous Roswell incident. I remember my father talking about the front page headlines in the Denver Post about the arrival of a spaceship. That was 1947. And of course, this is a picture of the famous weather balloon. Colonel Corso was involved in retrieving the parts of the wreckage. He was also involved in reverse engineering to try to figure out how these UFOs worked. Now, in his particular case, he was one of 16 people. He was the last of the 16. They had made a joint agreement that whoever survived the last, those that were working on the reverse engineering, would publish and tell the people the story. I highly recommend this book. A number of people come to me and they've said, well, why don't they just go and land on the White House lawn? Well, in 1952, they did the next best thing. There were a group of UFOs that hung over the nation's capital for hours. We sent a fighter up to go and pursue them. As the headline says, they outran them. There was no question about the fact that these things were real. As you can see, this was in the Eisenhower-Nixon era. Most people don't know about this story. This is the headlines of the Los Angeles Times, 1942, early 1942. Keep in mind that Pearl Harbor happened in late 1941. In Los Angeles in those days, everyone was worried about an invasion from the Japanese. So they had rigged large spotlights and they had the anti-aircraft guns ready to go. A large ship came in, hovered over downtown Los Angeles for several hours. Again, this is the front page of the Los Angeles Times. Here's the picture that accompanies that article. You can see the ship, you can see the searchlights. They bombarded that ship for several hours with artillery. Nothing happened to the ship. It lazily went off over the Pacific. However, several people were killed from falling artillery shells. This was witnessed by several 100,000 people. It made the front page of the LA Times, but it never went beyond that. This is a more recent picture, downtown Los Angeles. This is a picture from the mid-70s in New Mexico. Here's a picture, Bryce Canyon. This is one of the famous Billy Meyer pictures. These were taken in 1975. Billy had the privilege of photographing these extraterrestrial craft. They called them beam ships. He had a total of 800 photographs. Some of the best photographs we had. More than one type of beam ship. Most people don't know, but Billy Meyer was a one-armed man. He rode around the countryside on his motorcycle, making these pictures. Here's a picture of Billy, some 20-some years ago, being interviewed along with his neighbors. A number of these neighbors had also taken pictures, and most of them had witnessed these incredible events that happened over a series of years in rural Switzerland, just outside of Zurich. Lots of testimony here to the fact that extraterrestrials and UFOs are very real. This is a picture of the triangular craft that came to Belgium in 1989. It stuck around on and off for months. Thousands of people saw this craft. A few photographs. Here's the radar track of the craft as it moved from Liège up to the north and east. In December 2002, the government of the UK finally came clean about the Rendlesham affair. Rendlesham is northeast of London. It's a site of two military bases for the United States. In 1980, an extraterrestrial craft came, landed in the woods near those two military bases. It was witnessed by a number of U.S. military and British military. This book is important for a couple of reasons. One, it was written before the government of the UK came clean. Georgiana does an excellent job of showing the incredible cover-up that was done, how long it persisted, the contortions it went through to try to keep this information from the public. She went to Margaret Thatcher, the Prime Minister, asked Margaret Thatcher whether or not this information was true. Thatcher said, "Oh yes, it's true, but you can't tell the people." And of course we have crop circles. They're now occurring all over the world, and they come in an amazing array of colors and designs. Another means of communication from extraterrestrials, hoaxes. The interesting thing about crop circles is that when you walk into a crop circle with electronic equipment, there is a substantial difference from the crop which has not been fiddled with and inside the circle. Many people report that they go and have interesting sensations inside these crop circles. And my favorite one, this happened in November of 2002. A large meteor came in over Turkey. That meteor got down to about 30,000 feet. At that point, a UFO came out of nowhere, disintegrated that meteor, and moved it very gently off and dumped it into the Aegean Sea. This is a picture that was taken over New Mexico about 10 years ago. This picture shows a craft. That craft has been charged. Its skin has been charged, which enables it to travel faster in the atmosphere. Most people don't know, but the stealth bomber uses this same technology. The stealth bomber goes and uses a charged skin. That enables it to fly faster and enables it to fly longer. So there's a technology that we have reverse engineered from crashed UFO crash. This came from Old Mexico, an interesting picture of a UFO craft. I have trouble saying UFO because I really think of them as IFOs, identified flying objects. This one shows the craft with the skin charged. This is the way that these craft are able to travel through the atmosphere at amazing speeds. What they do is to create a field around them, negatively charged ions, and they basically fly into a vacuum. And what is this picture? Again, one of the conclusions I have reached from my research is that in many cases you don't know what you're dealing with in this entire area of UFOs, extraterrestrials, and paranormal phenomena. And what's this a list of? Anyone care to take a guess? What is this? Maybe this will help. I use terminology like non-human conscious life forms because I want to encompass as much of that which we do not fully understand as possible. Mortals, of course, are those like you and me that die. They can be aliens, extraterrestrials, extraplanetaries, off-planet, but they have bodies like you and me. If we shoot them, they die. Immortals are the angels, the celestials, the spirit guides. They, as far as we know, exist for a long period of time, if not forever. And yet, I have had the experience with both mortals and immortals, I'm quite sure. And in many cases, I could not tell the difference. There is a spectrum of conscious life. Many people think it's all about frequency. I think that's probably true for us mortals. We know that material like this desk is the slowest form of energy. We know that our bodies are simply a slow form of energy. The spiritual, I think there's more going on there than just a higher frequency. I think that's a dramatically different. That's why there's a discontinuity in this graph. And as far as the divine goes, I'm not even sure it belongs on this chart. It's so far above where we are. If you stop and think of a world of 1 trillion inhabited planets, how wonderful it is that there is a creator of all of this that keeps it organized. So I'm not sure the divine even belongs on this chart. It certainly is not on the same chart with us mortals. And yes, I have seen extraterrestrials, and I do believe that they function at a much higher frequency. Another way to look at this is as the spectrum of reality. Here, what we're looking at on the left is science. It's the visible end of the spectrum. It's what you and I are doing today, talking with each other, looking at each other. And then science is able to go and look at smaller, the micro level, and through telescopes look at the macro level. But it has not found a way, science has not found a way to go and look at the non-physical, which is much, much larger, much more difficult to sense except with non-scientific means. So what is the truth? The truth is that other countries are much more open about extraterrestrial contact and UFOs than we are. We saw examples of Belgium, the UK, Turkey. There was a report produced in France in 1999. The top generals got together, investigated the situation with extraterrestrials and UFOs. They came to the conclusion that yes, that they have pictures, they have radar evidence, and they have firsthand testimony of all that's been going on in France for many years. And their conclusion was that it was not a threat to the national security of France. This report was presented to President Chirac and it was made public. But you don't hear much about it in this country. Those that are in a position of authority, if there are any that really know the whole story, they're simply not talking. The whole arena has been reduced to one of sensationalism. The ugly is promoted over the benevolent. It's so weird that most public media will not touch it. And then, of course, there's the ridicule factor. If you think it's easy to go and talk about this stuff in front of an audience, it's very difficult. This is not something, again, that I ask for. This is something that I was drug into because I discovered the truth. And then there's the fear factor. Many people have been threatened because of what they know. For me, this has produced a crisis of confidence with those who govern us. And I think this view is shared by a majority of the American people. This is a result of a survey that was done in 2003. 72% of the American people believe that the government is not telling them everything that it knows about UFOs. That same survey indicated that 48% of the American people believe that UFOs have visited us. An amazing 33% believe humans have interacted with extraterrestrials. Now, where are these beliefs coming from? Well, one of the places these beliefs are coming from is the extraterrestrials themselves. They have told us that they have contacted, in this country alone, millions of people. And on a worldwide scale, millions more have been contacted. They have purposely not allowed us to remember a lot of this contact. I know when I first went and saw some of these events, and my wife will tell you, it took me 6 months to get my feet back on the ground. So there has been a lot of contact over the years, and it has been one-on-one contact. If you keep track, as some people have done, about this contact that has taken place between ourselves and races of humanoids from off-planet, less than 1% of that contact is based on an abduction experience. In other words, 99% is favorable, 1% is an abduction experience or a reported abduction experience. Here's one for you. Now, this comes out of testimony from some people that have been involved in the intelligence community for many years. 80% of the UFOs that we're seeing in the skies at night, 80% of those are man-made. That means that we have been able to reverse engineer the flying saucers. We've been able to go and figure out most of what's going on there, and we have produced UFOs. So we're at the point now where we have to make a decision. And that decision is, do you remain as a believer, or are you going to go and take it upon yourself to search out the truth? I'm not asking you to believe what I'm saying. I'm asking only that you find the truth for yourself. I believe that you can dismiss 90% of everything that you hear in the media. I believe you can dismiss 90% of everything that people are telling you about the whole arena of UFO contact. But you can't dismiss that final 10%. That final 10% ought to make you want to go and know more. So we've talked about interactions with non-humans. Now let's turn to a subject that is more grounded, if you will, closer to home, and that's our deteriorating planet. Over the last 10 years, the polar ice caps have melted at a rate that is 10 times the long-term what we know has happened over the last few hundred years. Over the last 600 years, the polar ice caps have melted and the sea has risen an average of about 1 meter every 100 years. Again, the polar ice caps are melting at 10 times that rate. It really doesn't matter whether you think this is due to natural cycles or whether it is due to some sort of global warming. The thing is that we are in a worldwide crisis, and we're potentially looking at additional problems. A recent Pentagon report stated there is an imminent scenario of catastrophic climate change. This will result in rising sea levels and major upheaval for millions of people around the world. That same report went on to say, future wars will be fought over survival rather than religion, ideology, or natural honor. So we have the melting polar ice caps. In the year 2003, there was 9,750 acres of tropical rainforest that was destroyed. That's 9,750 square miles. That's an area the size of the state of Vermont. Tropical rainforest takes 10,000 years to replace itself. And then we have water. You know, on this planet, only 1% of the water is available for human consumption. The other 99% of it is locked up in salty oceans and, of course, the polar ice caps. 20% of the people in the world do not have sufficient potable drinking water. 20% of the people. And this situation is getting worse on an annual basis. I think it's ironic that one of the best pictures I have here in this series is of this drilling platform in the Gulf. It really doesn't matter whether or not you believe that we'd be running out of our oil, whether it's a 5-year time frame or whether it's a 30-year time frame. It really doesn't matter. The thing is, we are depleting our natural resources. And this occurs year by year, and it's increasing. We've been told that these stores of petroleum were to last many hundreds of generations, and yet the majority of the known reserves of petroleum on this planet will be gone within the space of a mere 200 years. Similar things are happening with other natural resources. We are consuming them at a rate way beyond that which was planned by the creators of this planet. We don't really need to be reminded of what this picture is all about. Here's our response, and here's some of the casualties. Violence continues to this date. This is a recent picture, recent cover of The Economist. It's not, the case The Economist makes here is that what we really need to do is to raise the rest of the world to the standard of living that's enjoyed by the industrialized societies. That's all well and good, and I think that that is indeed where we need to head. But our planet cannot sustain 6 billion people at the rate at which we consume in the United States. We simply don't have the resources worldwide to accommodate that. This map was produced by World Watch. It indicates those countries where civil war and other violence is most likely to happen. You'll see that about half the countries in the world are something other than peaceful, subject to violence, subject to civil unrest. Violence is a fact of life that is happening in this world. And again, as we go through these, I ask you to remember, it's no one thing that's going on here that should trouble us more. What should trouble us is the fact that all of these things are happening at the same time. And then, of course, we have a situation that is epidemic in the United States and exists elsewhere in the world. Drug abuse cost $59 billion last year in the United States. That's the retail value of drugs on the street. $59 billion. What could we do with $59 billion if it were applied in some other direction? More importantly, what's it doing to our children? The ones that experiment with drugs, the ones that get hooked, the ones that become non-functional. And then over and above the illegal drugs, we have the prescription drugs. 40 million prescriptions, 40 million were written last year for drugs to treat depression and diagnose diseases like ADD. 40 million prescriptions. So I see a deteriorating planet. And again, it's not just one factor. It's all of these factors. All of them. There is a recent study, 2 studies that actually came out of the UK, 2 very distinguished British researchers. They reached the same conclusion. based on their studies of the disappearance of species on this planet. They are predicting that we are headed for mass extinction. All of the signs are there. Mass extinction is what happened to the dinosaurs. Mass extinction is what happens when we have a fundamental change in the way that life appears on a planet. And yet, we have a population who basically doesn't want to rock the boat. We have a population that is comfortable, particularly here in the United States and the other industrialized countries. We have a population that is allowing these things to take place. Now, I'm not going to ask you to read this chart, but let me try to go through a history of some of what has taken place beginning in 1945, when Project Paperclip was initiated, and Nazi scientists were recruited right after the Second World War. They were offered immunity and secret identities in exchange for working on top secret government projects here in the United States. In 1946, patients in VA hospitals were used for medical experiments. These experiments were called investigations, and they were done without the consent of those patients. In 1947, the CIA began a study of LSD as a potential weapon. In 1950, this is an experiment to determine how susceptible an American city might be to biological attack. The U.S. Navy sprayed a cloud of bacteria over San Francisco and then sent people in to measure the reactions of people to that bacteria. In 1953, the CIA initiated an 11-year program to produce and test drugs that would be used for mind control and behavior modification. In 1956, the U.S. military released mosquitoes infected with yellow fever over Savannah, Georgia, and Avon Park, Florida. And then they sent agents in posing as public health officials to test for the effects. In 1965, prisoners at Holmesburg State Prison, that's near Philadelphia, were subjected to digoxin, the highly toxic chemical component of Agent Orange. In 1966, the Army dispenses Basilicus niger throughout the New York subway system to determine what would happen in a biological attack. Again, all of these experiments were conducted without the consent of those upon which the experiments were performed. And then in 2001, we have the anthrax. Remember that? Right after the World Trade Center, there was anthrax that was mailed to a number of people. Yes, it was intercepted in the mail rooms. There were a few people that died, but no one was ever prosecuted for that. No one was ever caught. And yet we know that that anthrax came from a government laboratory. So this history of experimentations on the American population, all of this is carefully documented. And the government, of course, says, oh, we don't do that anymore. But yet, in 2001, we had anthrax. I can take a very dim view of the current situation. I can see that despite the fact things have going along for hundreds of years fairly well, in recent times we have a collective downward trend. And again, it's not any one thing, it's all of these things happening together. And we have a government who is not responsive to its citizens, a government that still continues to use us as human guinea pigs. To me, that is a deteriorating planet, because America is supposed to be the guiding light of democracy. I think Albert Einstein said it extremely well. We have to find some new ways to look at things and to solve the problem. So let's begin with that in mind. One of the things I think we have to do is look at ourselves. We, in my mind, are very constricted. The first thing we have to recognize is that we are more than just a physical body. One of those components is our superconscious. Now, the superconscious for me is that non-physical piece of me. It's that piece of me that is above the conscious chatter, above the everyday, going to work, making a living, my interaction with people. It's that quiet inner voice that I find from time to time. The superconscious is what enables out-of-body experiences and remote viewing to happen. You know, small children have very psychic abilities. If you stop and think about what they absorb during the first couple of years of their life before they are even verbal. Children are like little sponges. They go and operate on a psychic level. They operate on that psychic level until we go and tell them they can't do that anymore. It's that psychic level, and some people maintain that, most of us don't, that allows things like out-of-body experiences and remote viewing. If you want to know more about that, contact me or visit my website. And then, of course, we are connected to universe consciousness. Universe consciousness is that super network that allows all of us to go and communicate with each other non-verbally. You've had the experience, I'm quite sure, of knowing something was going to happen before it happened, or of knowing that someone was in trouble, or knowing who it was that was on the telephone before you picked it up. That's our connection. And of course, some people would wrap this up and say, well, that's our soul. I think that's the real me. I think my superconscious is the real me that is hidden away inside a facade. John Bradshaw talks about finding our inner child. Wayne Dyer talks about the spirit within. That's our superconscious. The good news is that it is immortal. The good news is that you and I will live, the real me will live forever. Now there's another piece to this. This is a piece that not everyone recognizes. This is the psychological construct. When you buy gasoline, when you go and talk to a waiter or a waitress in a restaurant. It's your construct dealing with that other person. It's not the real you. You don't have a heart-to-heart conversation every time you interact with another person. No, that's your construct. In his book, The Four Agreements, Don Miguel Ruiz talks about the way in which we domesticate children. We take children, and in many ways, we treat them like a pet. We teach them right and wrong. We teach them correct behavior. In Trillion, I talk about people living in cocoons. I don't know, maybe I should talk about them living in kennels, because we've been doing this to ourselves now for 200,000 years, handing it down from parent to child, so that everyone on this planet has a construct. It's been recognized. Maria Montessori recognized it many years ago. She talked about children unable to develop their own personality. In time, the construct comes to dominate our thoughts and actions. In time, it begins to act for us, in place of us, and certainly goes and acts in place of the real me. The construct is what goes and creates our fearful attitude. Keep in mind that it was there in place to protect us. The construct is also what keeps us asleep, keeps telling us, well, you're comfortable, you're happy, you don't have to look any further. The construct is what keeps us asleep. For me, this is the most important piece of the construct. I have within me the real me, but it's being separated from a direct connection to God. The construct gets in the way, and it's protecting me from that relationship. So the construct blinds us to who we really are. And it's that construct that automatically says anything that's unusual is fearful. Anything. Now, what most people have not recognized to this point in time, and this is new information from my investigations, the construct really takes on a life of its own. After a while, your construct that has been brought to you through the process of domestication begins to speak for you. And more, it is talking on your behalf. And then the construct begins to go and act with other people's construct. Again, it is the way in which we deal with other people 90% of the time. You're not going to have a heart-to-heart conversation with everybody you meet. That doesn't mean you couldn't do that, but in our society, according to the rules of our domestication, we don't do that. So then we form what are called group constructs, people acting the same way. I know when I was in the venture capital business, there was a prescribed way of behaving for that group. If you deviated from it, then, you just weren't part of the group, and you became unsuccessful. You became that rooster in the chicken yard who the rest of the roosters pick on. So the group construct becomes very powerful. And then, of course, the group construct goes and creates a societal construct. And that societal construct is what we have going today in this world, where my society doesn't like the way your society works. My society has certain rules. You're not behaving that way. Therefore, you people on the other side of the world are not part of my society. In fact, I'm not even sure you're human. The one thing we know about cancer is that if it is left unchecked, it will eventually consume its victim and it will destroy it. I believe that's what's going on today. I believe we have these constructs who have invaded and who are masking who we really are. And they are like a cancer, and they are destroying our world. I have to believe that we would not knowingly foul our environment. I would have to believe that we would not knowingly kill other people. I have to believe that if we were conscious, that we would not be in a self-destruct mode. But we are. And it's the constructs that are leading us that way. So we have three parts to ourselves. We have a physical body, which you have to pay attention to. Sure, you have to stay healthy. We have a superconscious that almost nobody pays attention to. A few people do. But that's the real me. And then we have the construct. Most of us are walking around in a cocoon in some sort of a facade. And it's that facade which deals with the other person. Now, how does this relate to extraplanetary, extraterrestrial, anything? Well, let's take a look at that. We have messages that have been given to us by extraterrestrials. Some of them are obvious, some not quite so obvious. One of the more obvious ones is that they have extraordinary technology. After all, they got here from a few trillion miles away, across a galaxy. So they have technology that enables them to move faster than the speed of light. You know, at the point in time when I was a believer, I used to believe in Einstein's theory of relativity. That states that nothing that is material, nothing physical can travel faster than the speed of light. And you know what? That's true. No question about it. Einstein was right. However, I have watched an extraterrestrial craft materialize. I have watched it go from nothing to being present. I have watched an extraterrestrial craft dematerialize. Once you understand that through technology you can move into a higher frequency, then you no longer are physical. Then you can travel faster than the speed of light. So one of the extraterrestrial messages is that they have a technologies, which are far, far advanced from what we have. This one is not quite so obvious. The extraterrestrials talk about the fact that the universe is organized and friendly. I think it's very easy for us to go and look around this world and see the play between good and evil, and simply take that interplay and say, well, the rest of the universe must be like that. What we're being told is, no, that's not the case. The rest of the universe is organized. The rest of the universe functions harmoniously. And by the way, the most of us that are coming here are friendly, we're benign, we're coming here for reasons They are seeking a benevolent relationship with us, a caring relationship. They are saying to us, this planet is interconnected with all the other inhabited planets in the galaxy. If something happens to this planet, it affects all of us. Extraterrestrials are very interested in what happens here. They would like to establish a benevolent relationship, a relationship which goes and allows us to go and be friends with them, because that's the way the rest of the universe works. They're looking at our environmental crisis. They're looking at it from 1,000,000 miles away, and they're saying, you are closer to extinction than you realize. They are echoing the results of those 2 British scientists that are saying, we're on the brink of a mass extinction. The extraterrestrials are giving us that same message. They're saying that the melting of the polar ice caps is not necessarily due to a natural phenomenon, that we are contributing to that through global warming. They are saying that that rainforest that you are so casually going and destroying, that takes tens of thousands of years to replace. That rainforest is vital to the survival of your species on this planet. You are much closer to the brink of disaster than you imagine. They also see the fact that we have developed weapons of mass destruction. And they are well aware that those weapons of mass destruction are proliferating. There have been only 2 explosions of nuclear devices that were used in time of war. But we also know that there are a number of nuclear weapons that are missing, unaccounted for. It's only a matter of time before someone explodes a nuclear weapon, either in an act of war or an act of terrorism. At that point in time, who knows what happens? The extraterrestrials are saying to us, you are on the brink of a 3rd world war. You are closer than you imagine. They're also saying to us that there is another planet in our galaxy which went and self-destructed. Another planet, not unlike our own, which fell apart due to a nuclear holocaust. They would like to convince us not to do that to ourselves, because again, we are family. We are connected to them. So they're here to help us. They're not here to save us. It's the old story of the fisherman and the fish. They would like to help us help ourselves. They would like to help us transform this planet into that which it can become. But we're the ones that have to do it, not them. They're not going to go and save us. So we've looked at some of the other pieces. Now let's turn to the implications of what all this means. Let's see if we can begin to solve what this bigger picture is all about, and see if we can figure out what it's going to take to provide a transformation. We could probably talk for several hours about all of the implications of extraterrestrial contact of the deteriorated planet on the political, economic situation. And then, of course, there's the impact on various institutions like religion and science. And there's the fact that there has been technological innovation based on reverse engineering from crashed spacecraft. and on and on. What I'd like to focus on today are the spiritual implications, because we have been told that it is only through in spiritual reinvigoration that we can go and change the cycle of what is going on this planet. First of all, we've talked about the fact that what we put out is probably what we get in return. I know that particular formula works in my relationships, and I have learned that it works cosmically. My experience is that non-human conscious life forms, whether they are interaction with extraterrestrials, simply viewing a UFO, or some sort of a paranormal contact with a spirit, an angel, it changes your beliefs, it changes your fundamental knowledge of what is here. It changes you. It did that to me, and I know that it can do it to you. We've talked about the fact that the vast majority of non-human conscious life forms are benign and that they are here to help. They have our best interests at heart. If they wanted to come and dominate us, they could have done that thousands of years ago. They could have done it 100 years ago. They could do it today. If they wanted to do that, as I tell people, we probably would have tasted better 100 years ago. So we are being asked to evolve spiritually because that's the only course that is open to us. And we are being invited to become citizens of the cosmos, invited to go and step up, take our place with other citizens of the cosmos. And again, the only way we can get there is through a spiritual evolution. Now you play these spiritual implications against the fact that we have a degrading situation on this planet. We really don't know how much time we have. I think we may have less than 5 years, and then on other days I think, well, maybe, just maybe, we might have longer. Maybe this is a problem we're handing off to our children or our children's children. I don't think, unless we make some fundamental changes, that it's going to last that long. So there are some very personal implications for me and for you. This is something that does affect you personally. This is not just some sort of an intellectual discussion about what might happen. This is not grist for the tabloids. This is very important, and it's very real. I happen to have a love affair with mountains. If our planet degenerates, these mountains no longer will exist. Or will these beautiful desert sculptures like Monument Valley, or these majestic animals, they are already disappearing. We are already in the process of self-destruction. Incredible beauty. This all goes away. It is possible that the seashore, which once again, who doesn't like the seashore? All of these things disappear, as well as some people very close to me. And what is it that we're giving to our children? What is it that we are handing to the young men and women who are our future leaders. We're giving them a world that is on the path to self-destruction. What promise is there of people in the beginning of life if we are allowing it to degenerate? What about friends? All the friends go away if we are destroying this planet. What about violence? What about poverty and hunger? So is this the end, or is this the beginning? We have a choice. We are at the pivotal juncture. This is a historic moment in human evolution. We can either choose to go and increase our consciousness. We can either choose to wake up, or we can choose to go and let the disasters continue. So what can we do? Let's go through what we've talked about just a little bit. We can acknowledge the reality of extraterrestrials. One of the things they've told us is that they are here to give us a wake-up call. They're hoping that their presence will cause us to think about the bigger picture, will cause us to think about what are you doing to your planet? There must be another way. We can face up to the deteriorating environment. And by environment, I don't mean just the environmental factors. I mean the fact that we really are not treating people that much better today than we were treating them 1,000 years ago. We are still going and treating people as if there is a superior and an inferior on this planet. As we talked about earlier, we can allow the real me to come forth. We can allow us to be more humane in our interactions with each other. We can go and step away from violence and fear as a reaction to things that happen. The real me that's now buried deep inside would love to have a relationship with other real me's. This is one I think that we will struggle with, but in our arrogance, we believe we have the answers. We have to admit that there are people with greater wisdom. There are angels, there are celestials, there are visitors from other planets that know more about the situation in which we find ourselves than we know. And we have to be willing to go and allow them and allow their wisdom to impact us. That means we have to step away from our arrogant attitude that we know it all. And then we have to consider the implications. And the implications of this are vast. If we look at something as simple as the fact that extraterrestrials have a source of energy, which is a non-polluting, basically vast source of energy that we know about, that we have reverse engineered from crashed spacecraft. But yet we are not using that. We are still stuck in our petroleum-based economy. Consider the implications. Now, we haven't talked too much about who are these others that are pursuing a path to spiritual consciousness. There are a number of groups out there who have been doing this for years. There are groups of well-intended people that want us to evolve. There are groups that are concerned about the environment. There are groups that are concerned about peace. There are groups that are dealing with poverty in third world countries. There are groups ensuring that water is available. There are groups that are fighting the drug situation. The problem is that all of these groups are going after their own small piece of the puzzle. Somehow or the other, we need to get all of the groups that are well-intentioned in terms of helping us evolve to a higher place of consciousness, to work together to let go of their individual egotistic views and come together to help evolve this planet, and to do it quickly. So, we can continue on our current path. That is an option. We can say, hey, I'm comfortable. Hey, I'm happy. Hey, things aren't really that bad. We can continue. Or, as Robert McNamara said, we can take charge. For those of you that don't remember who McNamara was, he was JFK's Secretary of Defense, the head of the Whiz Kids. That was in the 1960s. So this problem has been obvious, and the solution has been obvious since that time. We have to take charge. But it has to be done in a different way. It has to be done by letting our superconscious do it. We have tried the old ways. As Einstein said, if we continue to try to solve problems using the old ways of thinking, we are continuing to fail. Number one thing we need to do is understand that we are totally responsible for our actions. I had a wonderful mentor come into my life many years ago. John Boyle taught me from the very beginning, Mark, you are responsible for everything that happens to you. Everything. There is no such thing as being a victim. You are responsible. And so in that vein, we must take responsibility for what is happening to this planet. The power of affirmations has been proven many times. Affirm that which you would like to go and have happen, then begin to live as if it's true. We need to begin affirming that it's possible, affirming that which we want to have happen, and then beginning to live as if it's happening. There is a group of us that have come together, the Cosmic Paradigm Network. If you would like to go and join with us, go to my website, ufo-truth.com. Join with us. You can make a difference. We must see each other as brothers and sisters. That young man that was pictured on the front page of The Economist, the young man from Africa, in sharp contrast to our modern industrialized society, he too is my brother. Now let's take that one step further. Let's go and look at the extraterrestrials, those that are visiting us from other planets. They too are our brothers and sisters. We have to accept them as brothers and sisters. We are not less than, we are not more than. We are all brothers and sisters. We are all creatures of the Creator, of one, of the divine one of God. Forgiveness is a wonderful thing. It works in two ways. One, it enables those of us that are doing the forgiving to experience an incredible sense of relief. So not only does it impact those that are being forgiven, but the forgiver also receives an even greater benefit. So we must begin to forgive those who are our leaders. We must forgive those who have impacted our environment, who continue to support violence. We must forgive all of them. Because if we take responsibility for the situation, we're the ones that have put them and continue to keep them in a position of power. And finally, it's okay to risk changing because, as I said before, the real me, that real me is immortal. Once I understand that I'm not going to die, that the real me is not going to die, then it's okay to take a risk to go and change. It's okay to do things a different way. It's okay to step up and try to transform this planet. John Wayne has a way of saying things. We can either go and step up, or we can refuse to. We've been given an invitation. We've been told that if we go and evolve this planet, if we go and dodge this bullet, if we go and step away from self-destruction, that we will be accepted by the other planets of the cosmos. I believe that we are indeed at the pivotal juncture in human history. There are a number of questions that have been posed as a result of this talk. So let me try to answer one or two of those. The first of those deals with the whole subject of alien abductions. There seems to be a popular conception that the only type of interaction we have with extraplanetary beings is when they come, swoop us away, abduct us out of our beds at night, and take us onto their spaceships. Well, let me tell you what I've learned after talking now with hundreds of people. First of all, as I said before, abductions are a very small percentage of the overall picture. Do they happen? Yes, I believe that they have happened. But it is a very small piece of the overall picture. Are there rogue elements out there? Yes, I believe amongst the mortals who visit this planet, the extraterrestrial mortals, there are those who are not acting in our best interests. But they are a very small fraction of the overall. There's one other piece to this alien abduction, and that is that we know that a large number of the alien abductions have been staged. And by that I mean humans of this planet dressing up like ETs, and for reasons of fear and other motivations, they have staged abductions. That does happen. A second question that comes up inevitably is, has there been instances of mating between extraterrestrials and humans? On this one, I'm a little less clear. There are reports of this happening currently. There's some testimony. I have not researched this enough to have a firm conclusion. What seems to be more conclusive is that on a historical basis, and this is covered in my new book, Decimal, we have had a systematic interaction going back hundreds of thousands of years between extraterrestrials and people of this planet. And I think on a historical basis, yes, there has been mating that has gone on. Another question that comes up is, what are the reasons behind a cover-up? Why would, what motivates the government to do this? Well, first of all, I would say it's not the government that is doing this. The people within the government that know about what's going on are a tiny fraction of the overall government. So let's put that to one side. But I do think there is a tiny fraction that has a pretty good idea of this entire issue of extraterrestrial contact. This began back during the Second World War, when we finally discovered that the Foo Fighters were here, and we discovered other things during that period of time about extraterrestrials. When I say we, it was a small group, primarily in military intelligence, that made these discoveries. Then it goes back to the motivation expressed by Margaret Thatcher. You can't tell the people. Well, that's the arrogance of our established institutions of our government, not wanting to let people know the real truth, either because they can't handle it or because knowledge is power. I tend to think it's the latter, which then plays into the fact that if and when this comes out, there's a lot of people that would have a lot of egg on their face for the cover-up. So that which is disclosed tends to be after people have died off. That is when a lot of people are coming forth, when they decide, well, I'm in my last years, I can now risk this. And then, of course, there's the entire situation with the reverse engineering of technologies. Here again, we're back in an old power play. The government, whichever piece of the government it is that has successfully reverse engineered technologies, wants to go and keep these technologies to itself and to its very special corporate partners who have been a part of all this. And last but not least, the final question would always, why is there such a sense of urgency? I'll come back to, it's not just one thing that is happening to us at this point in time on this planet. It's not just one thing that deserves your attention. Yes, it's good to be environmentally aware. Yes, it's important to go and feel for our brothers and sisters around the planet. But all of these things are happening at the same time. So we have the power to transform this planet. We do indeed have that power. but it has to be a collective will to break the pattern. It has to be a collective desire on our part to go and make this a better place. I have learned that the great spiritual teachers that are here on this planet, that have visited this planet, have told us over and over again that the true path to harmony is through spiritual evolution. Those messages have been here. It's time we woke up. The same messages are being given to us by the extraterrestrials. We need to go and start paying attention. Thank you very much. I've enjoyed visiting with you. Again, feel free to contact me. My website has a lot of the same information and a lot of my other discoveries. Please visit us and join with us if you have a desire to transform this planet. Good day.